When the Spanish came to the Americas, one of their driving motivations was to spread Christianity throughout the world. They saw this as an extension of the reconquest of Spain. They had driven out the Arabs from Spain, and they were continuing to push west and push to the New World and to extend Christianity to anyone they could. Now, the Christian priests, mostly Jesuits, decided that the best way to convert the local people of the Americas to Christianity was to do it in their language. The Spaniards first arrived in the Americas in 1519, and by 1534 they had brought a printing press to Mesoamerica to print mostly books in indigenous languages. By 1572, they had printed over 100 grammars, catechisms, and vocabularies and other grammatical descriptions of indigenous languages of the Americas. This was frankly incredible because there wasn't even a grammar of Spanish published until 1492. And here we are barely 30 years later, and in the middle of the New World where there's very little access to these kind of resources, and they're printing books in indigenous languages. This was completely unheard of. Prior to this, nobody gave a crap about languages that weren't Greek or Latin or descended from one of them. For a lot of these languages, the Jesuit catechisms are the only surviving written record we have of these languages. This was also really the first time in Western history that anybody was even bothering to argue that indigenous people had rights and were humans. A priest named Bartholomew de las Casas in particular was incredibly influential in arguing for indigenous rights and convincing the Spanish crown that the indigenous peoples of the Americas ought to be treated as Spanish citizens. Now, there's a lot you can criticize about that, but I want to criticize the linguistic documentation they were doing at the time. Even though they were documenting these languages, they were doing so by imposing the template of Latin and Greek on these languages. So Latin and Greek have noun declensions, cases, endings at the end of nouns that indicate what they do in a sentence. Well, a lot of indigenous languages of the Americas don't have that, or don't have as robust of a system. So these priests would translate every single one of these cases, all like dozen cases, from Latin into one of these indigenous languages, and most of the time they would all just have the same translation. Or they would try to translate adjectives and nouns and verbs into these languages, but these languages didn't always have separate categories for adjectives, nouns, and verbs. A lot of languages just don't have adjectives, they use verbs instead. Whenever they found there was a difference between Latin and Greek and these indigenous languages, they said that these indigenous languages just had a deficit. They were in some way defunct as languages.